Whilst we might think we are the most intelligent beings on the planet, as writer Zach DeAngelis points out, but intelligence isn't necessarily based on how much technology we have. It's about using the tools available to you intelligently. For example, if we had 8 legs and were the size of a quarter, we wouldn't possibly have built things like a Golden Gate Bridge or engineered an aqueduct system, no matter how intelligent we were. Instead, think of spiders on a smaller scale, where a sapling is the same size as a skyscraper is to us. Their world is small and their intelligence must be looked at on a smaller scale. What does all this spider talk have to do with killing? Hold on, we'll get to it. Death is a topic that most of us avoid, despite many great philosophers saying that accepting one's own mortality can help you live a better and more fulfilling life. Yeah, I thought this was going too well. Hang on. I thought we were over this, guys. Did you call the cops on me again? That's the 3rd time this week. Okay, I thought we were past this. Obviously, legally, we cannot kill, but what are the morals behind it? Killing is necessary for any living being's survival, and I'm not condemning it. I love to eat meat, even though I know where it comes from. What we are going to do is decompose the constructs of what is right and wrong, justified or unjustified, and illustrate that it's all a gray area. The law tells us that we can't murder people, we can't kill animals except with permission in a humane way, and you can't keep ice cream in your back pocket in Georgia. Personally, I endorse all of these laws. This is most likely because I grew up in a culture that enforced these laws, teaching me that murder is bad and life is precious. If I grew up, say, as an ancient Aztec, it would be okay to invade rival tribes, murder the men and children, enslave the young women, and sacrifice the leaders to the gods. Now that is an extreme example, but the Aztecs thought they were killing for a good reason. That would help themselves, and I'd say most of the other people in the tribe, or even the rivaling tribes, wouldn't have even batted an eye, as this was just how it was. So here's the reason laws can be questionable, and I'd rather explore a person's morals. Let's just say in the UK that someone killed another person out of fear, maybe they were threatened, or a person had just done something terrible to them already. Under the court of law, this would count as murder. Let me give you an example. Let's just say a man walks into a taxi, he points a gun at the driver's head and tells him to drive somewhere where he intends to kill somebody. If the taxi driver does what he's told, again, with a gun to his head, he will be charged with murder or at least an accomplice to murder. If the taxi driver, say, stops, grabs the gun and shoots the man, he can also be charged with murder. Even with the self-defense argument, he will still be accused of it. The law can be a little murky, and I think it's interesting to take a step back and explore what killing is like without the lens of murder. Is it okay to kill things if they aren't sentient? What exactly is sentience? According to Google, it is having the capacity to have feelings. Here's the thing, according to that definition, there are plenty of animals that are sentient. Elephants have the ability to mourn the death of family members and friends. Dolphins can be trained to recognize symbols and live in family groups that form strong bonds. Chimpanzees can be taught sign language and have been known to share food with one another. Even creatures such as rats and mice have been shown in a famous study in 1958, hungry rats that were only fed if they were pulled a lever to shock their litter mates refused to do so, suggesting that the rodents have a sense of empathy and compassion for their fellows. Another study published in 2006 in the Journal of Science found that mice would grimace when their competitors were in pain, but only if they knew the mouse personally. And even back to spiders, whilst most, save the Cyclosa, don't seem to have the self-awareness or show emotional intelligence, they still show evidence that they are extremely intelligent at their scale. They can be trained similar to dogs, they have memories, and show that they can outsmart their prey by sneaking up on them and pouncing them. Okay, but there are some animals that aren't sentient, is that okay? Now here is something really important, the difference between killing and murder. In the Bible, the two are differentiated by intent. This means accidental killings, self-defense killings, usually in your own home, and killing to save the life of an innocent person are not seen as murders. Now, I'm no Christian, but I think other than the last one, which is a moral gray area, like surely you can find a way to save the person, this is a pretty good way of looking at it. Now here's the thing, according to that definitions, and my taste buds hate to admit it, but vegans have a point. I'm pretty sure that those farmers mean to kill those pigs, chickens, or whatever delicious meat you like to put on the table. So does that make it murder? Well, no, because you can't murder an animal. Well, what makes us different to animals? Our sentience is not exclusive to us. Does your moral justification come down to, sucks to be them, they should have just been more the dominant species? Have you ever wondered where you get statistics on smoking, diseases, or nerves? Well, it wouldn't be legal or moral to test on humans. There are estimated 50 million animals that are experimented on in the United States, according to the Humane Society. Furthermore, they go on to say, whilst the US Department of Agriculture does compile statistics on animals that use in experiments, purpose-bred mice and rats, specifically bred to be used in experiments, are not counted in the annual USDA statistics, meaning that they can be killed during the experimentation with no repercussions. business.queensland.gov.au details that animals can be killed during experimentation, if approved by an AEC, and if the procedures comply with the requirements of the scientific code, which include avoiding death as an endpoint, unless it is essential for the aim of the project. So if we ignore the intentional suffering some of the animals are put through and just focus on the death, it is not only legal but seen as moral for a greater cause, such as saving human lives or proactively trying to prevent disease or death. If animals are sentient, which is precisely why many of them are chosen, what does this say about our compassion? It essentially takes us to the classic trolley dilemma of killing a few animals to potentially save many human lives. Whilst it is easy to say, psh, easy, we'll just save the many human lives or the group of people, imagine you were the one on the other side. There is no true answer. What about the reason I choose not to support horse racing? Picture a horse running along. Now, we don't know why the horse runs. Maybe there's a carrot at the end. Maybe it just loves to run. It's most likely the fact is being all whipped in the behind by the little man sitting on top. The horse is running his little hooves off. He's winning the race, and suddenly he takes a tumble. His leg is broken. He's been pushed too hard. According to Deaf Watch, just in Australia, during the 2020-21 season, over 149 horses were injured and then put down during races, with thousands more happening off the track during training or when they were no longer commercially viable. This is because it costs much more to nurse a horse back to health, and even if you did, they would surely never race again. In the NBA, when someone is traded unexpectedly or screwed over, they say, it's just a business. But this is taking that to the next level. I don't think I'd be arguing with anyone here if I said that putting the horses down shouldn't be illegal. I can't see the moral justification for it other than greed. Even if you don't believe in that, what about population control? Not even when it comes to humans, but just animals. A lot of the time, the justification is simply, it's nicer for us to live there. We don't want too many rats squirming around, even though we're most likely living in the remains of that rat's home, where its ancestors probably roamed in the thousands. Okay, they're just dumb animals. We obviously have to prioritize ourselves. So what about population control on humans? War is a time when killing is not only legal, but also moral, exciting, cool. Look, I think I'm arguing with no one on the planet when I say war is bad. We can kill because it is for a justified cause. But does this mean killing is okay when you're doing it for something you believe in? I think most army generals would say so. Now, I am incredibly grateful for our vets and understand that they were doing what they have to do in order to keep us safe. To be honest, with the information we have in 2023, I'm not sure how the army motivates or justifies the killing anymore. Maybe someone who served can let me know. Let's just say, for example, you did it and you hated it. You felt pain every time you killed someone and you wish you didn't have to go through this for your cause. I think that's pretty acceptable and how most people would react in the situation. But surely there are some people that love it. And at that point, is it no longer justified? Or is it just an excuse and they are both as bad as each other? Plants may not be fully sentient, but they are certainly alive and like animals can feel emotions, communicate and defend themselves. According to studies, they wither when they are stressed, they release chemicals in the ground and the air that affects the behavior of the animals and other plants around them, and they can defend themselves, as Thirst puts it. When a plant is being attacked by a predator, such as an insect or a herbivore, it can release chemicals that attract the predator's natural enemies, such as birds or parasitic wasps. Whilst they are not conscious, they are still alive and have emotion, which is a big reason why I don't understand why killing an animal is seen as worse than killing them. At some point, you got to accept that something will die for you to sustain yourself and live, and whether you think this as a moral trade-off is worth it. Have you ever been out with a friend and there's a bee or a wasp flying around and they suddenly start freaking out? I always say to them, just act calm and natural. They don't attack for no reason, only if they feel threatened. At which point I realize they aren't listening and they're trying to swat it out of the air with the shoe, which in turn is what makes it attack. We can look at animal behaviors to reflect our own because it's unencumbered by other humans and they still act instinctually and naturally. And animals only naturally attack with a reason. So could this be the answer? If you have a reason, killing is okay. In a way, it depends on the reason. On the one hand, survival and self-defense are usually seen as good reasons to fight or even kill. Whereas killing your partner's lover because you're hurting or killing to gain money are seen as unacceptable reasons. The thing is, anyone who has ever killed someone has thought they had done it for a good reason, or at least one that benefits them. Well, it depends how these morals are formed and stipulated. For argument's sake, let's say the person that killed their partner's lover thought it was the only thing they could do to survive the pain that they were feeling, and it was essentially to them a self-defense. The guy killing someone for money could be using that money to put food on the table. If he doesn't, his family will surely starve. Are they still wrong to kill? Look, obviously these moral questions are all something that everyone has to work through and decide for themselves. But I just find it absolutely fascinating when you deconstruct the rules and laws that are put around us and think of it just as a moral exercise. So it is okay to kill as long as you have a justified reason. In which case, what about the death penalty? I think rehabilitation should always be an option and don't believe in the death penalty. But what happens if you say you're a murderer or someone who does unspeakable things? They rehabilitate, serve their time, and are let back out into the community again, only to recommit the crime. Then the cycle repeats, rehabilitated again, and then it happens again. Well, at that point, there would be an intense study, probably a book, and in a few years, a documentary, but that's not the point. That is two people that shouldn't have lost their lives or been traumatized because we let them back out. At that point, would the death penalty be justified? The principle of retribution is something that is believed by many philosophers and legal scholars. It's the notion that any evil is ordered to be met with a response that is of equal force, essentially an eye for an eye. Retributive punishment is widely seen as showing respect to the person of the offender. Many favor it over the current criminal system as it will defend individuals against abuse and reduce the number of soft sentences in the event of conviction. Now, if you took this literally as it was originated, this principle would be in favor of the death penalty. However, with modern context, the punishments that are called for would be harsher than what we currently have, but not quite to the point of death. If even modern fans of the principle of retribution don't believe in the death penalty, is there ever a time is that killing as a punishment is justified? According to the American death penalty laws, in a small minority of cases, someone can be charged with the death penalty if they order, contract, or participated in a felony that led to the murder. Which means it is possible that someone that didn't even commit the murder and got the death penalty, surely veering far from the principle of retribution. Eamon points out that a person's brain is separate from their mind, and damage to the brain can affect their mind.
You know, when I first started scanning people, I didn't really have an opinion on the death penalty. I just really hadn't thought about it. I thought if free will is black or white, you have it or you don't. And then as my work became known, defense attorneys would send me people who did really bad things, and their brains were so damaged. And when I would go to court, and a lot of people hated me for that, you know, if you have a bad brain and you did something terrible, you don't get to go home. But should you kill them? I mean, it's a really important question. And I'm like, no, you know, it's not the sign of an evolved society to kill sick people. I mean, you have to protect society from them. But what I've seen is if we rehabilitate their brain, they can have a meaningful life.
I agree with Dr. Eamon. Whilst murders shouldn't go unpunished, he does go on to say that it's easy to label people as bad or a murderer, but it is harder to ask why. I think, like the horses, the main argument for the death penalty is actually to save money. If a person has prison in life, they can't contribute to the community and will then be just using resources. Whilst I don't think the death penalty should be given out as a sentence, I think it should be a choice for prisoners who have been sentenced to life to exercise at any point. The infamous insanity defense. It's rarely used during criminal trial, yet opens up a fascinating conversation about accountability when it comes to murder. According to Luke O'Neill's article, for the insanity defense to be employed, it must affect his or her reasoning process, his or her cognitive ability, not just affect their emotion or volition. If in this case, our mind is compromised and it is said not to be our fault, let's just say the mental illness was triggered by the childhood trauma from the parent, is it then the parent's responsibility for the murder? Most people think the insanity defense lets you walk free, but this is rather far from the truth. Again, citing Luke O'Neill's article, if an individual is not criminally responsible, he or she isn't free to walk away as if unacquainted. Detention in a secure psychiatric unit in a prison can be just as long or longer than any prison term. Treatment rather than the punishment is not a get out of jail free card. A society should not be judged by how it treats its outstanding citizens, but how it treats its criminals. The blame for the murder does not matter, and what is most important is getting the sick person the much needed health. I agree with helping these people, but many of these people who are in prison have sick brains at a minimum, which most likely trickles over to their mind. Why do they not all have access to psychiatric help rather than in just a few extreme cases? Now you might be looking at the timestamp of this section would be like, I have not indirectly killed anyone. I believe if you live in a first world country, you have food, clothes, materials, items, or appliances come at the cost of someone in a third world country dying because of pollution, taking of land, resources, or worse. Unfortunately, no matter how much of a natural hippie you are, if you think about this long enough, you've done something that has indirectly killed someone. Just in case you were planning on sleeping tonight. Movies and television about the apocalypse or the past can teach us a lot about human nature. I always notice a pattern that is the same. Without society, government, major consequences, or leadership, people tend to turn to savages. Some examples are Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, The Last of Us, or just straight up human history. Seriously, think about it. When you watch these shows, people are constantly killing each other out of hate, to one-up each other, or to follow through a cause, which is usually themselves. When you're watching, it might be easy to sit there like, oh, I wouldn't do that, or that isn't how most people act. But because, to be frank, if you didn't act like that, you would be dead. It's usually the character that kills all of their enemies, leaves no one to seek out revenge, who ends up surviving the longest. Is it just human nature to kill for what they want or need? Without laws and consequences, would we all see each other in a very different light? Is this how we're supposed to live? At least this video finally being out will explain my search history. Whatever your answer to these questions, it seems that there are times when killing is simply essential for us to survive. Hopefully most of us get through our lifetimes without killing another person. After doing this research, my opinion is that killing is justified in self-defense or by accident with no real intent unless you were doing something that you knew had risk of killing someone. But this would still be a case-by-case basis and provides a lot of a moral gray area. Although it should be done humanely, animals or plants is okay as we need sustenance and I don't think we have inherited photosynthesis yet. Most importantly, you should murder that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'm sure if like anything was gonna make me vegan, it would have been this video, but I just think I love the taste of meat too much. This was rather hard to write about, as a lot of the time I would just end my points with like a question, but it got to the point where it didn't I felt like for the audience it wouldn't be satisfying. So I had to choose to add in my opinion a lot more than I normally do, to give it just like a sense of progress, closure, and with each of the arguments included. Whilst it is my opinion that it is okay and a necessary evil, I don't really understand clothing, to be honest, or like I work retail and for some reason just as a society we're obsessed with it being real leather. I haven't done much research on it, but like the skin from the cow surely isn't like the best thing possible. It's just like something we've given value to. I'm sure they could come up with a synthetic leather that's probably even better. I just want to hear like everyone's different opinions on this stuff, so I don't think it's any less valid if it's different to mine. So like obviously don't put anyone down for expressing their opinion. I think that's just childish, but it's, yeah, I really want to hear that, like what you guys have to say. It's such a, like there's no right or wrong answer here, so go for it.